welcome to the Swing Smarter Monthly Newsletter. This is your host, Joey Myers from hittingperformancelab.com. And I have the pleasure of, I got a friend who's been a friend for a long time, since the beginning of Hitting Performance Lab, probably even Swing Smarter Baseball Rebellion. Is that about where you done? Yep.
Right about that time. Yep.
And so this is Geoff. Is it Rottmayer?
Rottmayer. Yep.
Rottmayer. So this is Geoff. I think y'all are in for a treat because we're going to be talking about the kind of mental, the process, all that kind of stuff. So first, I want to welcome you to the show, Geoff.
I appreciate it, man.
And we were just talking about the beard that he's got, that he's sporting. A beautiful, beautiful beard there that has taken some time and some work and some tutelage to keep.
Yep.
Well, hey, brother. So you've been working. What I really liked, that we had a conversation before, obviously getting on this one, that you were talking about your process that you're using, which we'll get into here in a second. But you spent the last 5 or 6 years really honing it and perfecting it. And not that any process is ever perfect, but you got it to a point where you got a bunch of case studies and things like that. So go over. I know we talked about some of the pillars in your programming that you talk about. What are those pillars? And then we can kind of start doing a deep dive into them.
Yeah, so we came up with the 5 pillars. We call it the 5 pillars of the strategic advantage player development process. And so the 5 pillars is going to be, the first one is mindset, and we can go deeper on all of that. And then we have the off-season training, and then we have preseason practice, and then we have in-season game planning, and then we have game day execution. And so everything that we built out it's basically a framework. And we'll get into it in a minute, how we built the pieces into it. But what I found was, when I started this, was I wanted to kind of build out a process that would help guys in different parts of the season. And so what I found was, we were having a lot of guys we were doing awesome on the training side of it. And so the game day side was where we was kind of lacking a little bit, especially when they started to level up against guys that are just as good, if not better than them. And so my whole journey this last 5 years has been figuring out how to get guys to compete against guys just as good, if not better than them.
Very cool. And before we get into that, give a little background, your background, where you played, and just, so people go, why I have to listen to Geoff here?
Sure. Yep. No, I grew up in Clearwater, Florida. So I played at a high school down there, and then I got drafted by the Florida Marlins. There were areas of my game that I knew I needed to work on. So I was originally going to go to Georgia Tech and play football and baseball. And so, but I ran some transcript issues. And so now I'm pretty passionate about understanding that piece of it. But that led me to JUCO in Oklahoma, Seminole State, one of the premier JUCOs down there. And so I spent a year down there. We went all the way to Junior College World Series. I probably played some of the best ball I've ever had. And then I went over to Florida Gulf Coast in Fort Myers, Florida, and played there for 3 years. And then the things that I need to work on in my game, I didn't improve on. I knew I needed to work on them, but I didn't know how to do it. And so it cost me my ability to play professional baseball. And so now this is where I spent the last 15, 16, 17 years trying to figure out what was the missing link for me. And so that's how I kind of got into where I'm at right now.
Very cool. And so now go into what was the origin of these 5 pillars? Was it something that maybe in 10 years ago you came up with pillar 1, and then a couple of years later pillar 2, or was it more like it was a flood, like an aha moment? Oh shoot, we need to really work this out. What was the origin story basically?
I think when we all first started out, we try to figure out, we know what we know. And then some of us like to reflect on where we were at and how we could have done things differently. And that's where I was at. And I was I was a power hitter type of guy, but I swung and missed a lot. And it wasn't a practice thing for us. And so when I got into the coaching side of it, I got into the what I call the training piece of it. And so I now call that off-season training. So there's a place for it. Obviously, you got to train. You got to get better. You got to put in your work. And so But what I was finding is that we were transitioning to in season, we were still kind of in a training mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And so we never really had the transition in that what I call now preseason practice and then in-season game planning. And so we never really had the mindset shift to allow it to play well on game day. So the training piece was all about let's get better, become a better hitter on game day.
Mm-hmm.
And so guys were getting better, but it just wasn't where I felt like they need to be, especially when they started leveling up against guys just as good, if not better.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started digging deeper, and I actually ran across the guy who works with me now. His name is Daryl Coulter. Mm-hmm. And we started kind of brainstorming this, and he was talking about game day being about the opponent. Mm-hmm. And so we kind of all sit there and say, of course, but really it was the mindset behind it. And so that really got us kind of digging really deep into, okay, we got to go from off-season training to preseason practice to in-season game planning. And so the difference is, so can I go into deeper on this?
Go for it.
Okay, yeah.
Yep.
All right, so the off-season training it's more about your athleticism, like getting bigger, faster, and stronger. It's about getting your numbers, getting your active speed. It's about practice habits and routines and your attitude. And then the mindset is really about you. It's all about you doing what you got to do to get yourself to be a better player. Mm-hmm. And then when we transition to preseason practice, the mindset has to be about going from training to working on getting your baseball skills game ready. Mm-hmm. So now it's like, okay, now how do we get, take everything that we developed in the offseason and let's turn them into skills that we can use in a real baseball game that we can game plan with. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of how we went with that. So the preseason practice, what we do in there, what I call our stick process. And for us, to me, that's the task of hitting. It's so we have the first act is seeing the ball, the next one is timing, the next one is understanding your pitch, your discipline, and then your swing. And so I started kind of working the process backwards. Instead of starting with the swing, we started with, hey man, let's see what the ball looked like out of the hand and how do we get there and get there consistently, because you can't get there all the time.
Right.
But if you can work that process to get there early, then you have a chance to see the ball early and long. Mm-hmm. And then you have a chance to see some of the cues that the ball telling you and even what the hand's telling you. Mm-hmm. And so we spent a lot of time focusing there first. And then what I found with that was the timing got better. Mm. And when the timing got better, the pitch selection got better because we were seeing the ball. And then ultimately the swing got better. Now, that didn't mean guys didn't need to work on their swing, because they did. But I felt like if we could get the task right, then we can see where we were really at with the swing, because there's so many other variables. And so that's kind of, then we went into what I call the command hitting. And command hitting is being able to tie a situation account to every single rep that we do. And then going through our pre-pitch process, when I call it a mental game, it's really about the process. It's really about, how you think in terms of baseball. It's not the feel good stuff. It's not the deep breathing and the positive self-talk. And there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. But when it comes to baseball, it's very strategic. And so how we think in terms of what we want to do and how we prepare for our bat against an opponent matters. And so we started practicing command hitting, like, hey man, I want you to hit the ball right there. And this situation account, that's when you would need to be able to do that. And so we would work and not manipulating our swing, but really understanding what pitch I can do it with, what pitch I can't do it with, and understanding, how to actually do it. That don't mean that we always get the result, but at least we start working on perfecting the skill.
Yeah.
And then from there, yeah.
Well, give me an example. Like most of the coaches out there, their big thing is two strikes, right? So what are some of the two strike mindset approach type things that you guys talk about?
Yeah, so with two strike, what we want guys to understand is it depends on the pitcher too. So a lot of the things that our approach and our game plan is all based on the opponent. And so we have to think about that and what pitches he has. And so, like, it depending on the pitches that he has and how he uses them. So we call it PVML. So there's a pitch, there's a velocity, there's a movement to a location. And so the more we understand that, the more we can game plan with that. So with 2 strikes, just a generic approach. What we'll tell guys is you got to be able to hit every pitch on every plane, right? And so you have a wide variety of velocity ranges to cover. And so what we'll tell guys is we can do a couple things. One, try to take the fastball down right field line. So if I can do that, now I let every other pitch travel a little bit deeper, and I can keep the offbeat stuff fair. But the other thing that allows me to do is make sure it's a strike, because I think most hitters, we swing too much. As weird as that sounds, is we got to get better at taking pitches. Like the best hitters in the world are good because of the pitches that they take, not the pitches that they swing. And so when we try to get guys to understand that, like, hey, maybe there's a situation in count where you want to sit on a curveball, sit on a slider, and that's fine. And you can catch that ball a little more out front or whatever you're trying to do. But with 2 strikes, we want to say, hey, let the fastball get deep, try to take it down the first base line or third base line if you're a lefty, and then that will let the curveball and the changeup travel a little bit deeper, and you can see if it's a strike. And because the balls that are a mistake, you're going to turn on. It just looks so good, and you're going to hit it. And so that's kind of how we do the 2-strike approach.
Very cool. So you guys are basically hunting, again, depending on the pitcher, and that's what I always tell my hitters. You're not jumping into the ballpark like that movie Back to School with Rodney Dangerfield, where he up on the high rise, and he's licking his thumb, checking the wind, and then he does the parts, and then he jumps. You're not just walking into the stadium deciding what you're going to hunt or what your plan is. You're going to base it off of the observations of the pitcher, like you said.
Right. Yeah. And that takes us to the preseason. And that's what the preseason for us is all about. And we like to think of it like football. Like, how does the football season work? It goes in the off season, it's all about getting bigger, faster, and stronger. The preseason is about honing in your plays, understanding your skills, and know what plays you want to run. And then the in season is all about studying the opponent and practicing all week for that one opponent.
Good point.
And so with the baseball, it's like, nowadays, especially the good pitchers, the guys that are not very good, they suck, you should hit them, So, but the guys that are good, that we're trying to level up against, they're in the PBR, they're in perfect game. So their video is on YouTube. Their scouting report is on PBR.
That's true.
And so you can study them before you see them.
Yeah.
And now, and basically for us, it's like, we really just want to understand their PVML, their pitches, their velocity, and then how their pitches move, so that we can understand what we want to attack and what we want to take. And so with all those information out there, now we can practice. Even if we play every day, you have practice for the game. Your whole practice, your whole mindset is about that pitcher that you're going to face that day.
I love that. Yeah, that's a great piece of advice, especially with that. If these players you're facing, these good ones, they've got recruiting things right on PBR. I mean, they're right out there on the internet. You just search them. You know who you're going to play. The person. You just search them up on and look up their scouting report, and there it is right there. So you got other people doing the work for you. So why not use the internet? Yeah, I love that. So that's through. So during the game, the in season, you're talking about that game planning. You're talking about studying your opponent and competing against your opponent. Is that the third pillar?
Yeah, so that would actually be the fourth one. So the first one we didn't talk about just yet with the mindset. We talked about the mind. Well, I want to talk about that, but we'll go back to that one. Okay. But the in season, so we have the pregame data research. Where you can find on them, try to figure them out, and then it's about like watching the game, like the game within the game. Like, and we tell guys, like, you need to be like, when you guys are hitting, every at bat, it's like, it mentally needs to be an at bat that you're taking. And then reading and studying the pitcher, like what is he doing in certain situations to count? What does he do? What are his tendencies? What are his habits? What does he like to do? How does he respond when there's runners in scoring position? What does he like to go to? You know, so really studying and watching what he's doing, because every advantage you can have is a strategic advantage, and you can use it against him to be better. And so it's really about getting these guys to understand how to watch a game. But the thing is like, we can't just tell them to watch a game. They don't really know what they're looking at. So this is something that has to be taught. Like, what do I look at? What's the basic? What do I start with? And once they get the basic down, then they start understanding, oh, dude, holy crap, I just noticed he did this, you know? And then he does this. And once you start teaching them how to think and how to watch a game, then they start noticing other little things that they can use to their advantage.
Now, do you have them watch one of those things, or body language? Do you have them watch the pitcher to see, you know, if they're in these kind of slump positions versus chest out, you know, that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. And then we like to see how they respond to everything. The more we can have, the better. You know, the data. Now, the tricky part is not overanalyzing it.
Yeah,
it's just information that you gather that you can go. But when you get in that box, after you go through your pre-pitch routine, you get in that box. It's all about, okay, I've given my brain a direction. Now it's about going out there, seeing the ball, and reacting. And again, I've given myself a starting point. That doesn't mean that's always what's going to happen.
Yeah,
but at least I have a starting point. I have a plan.
Right. Well, it's predictability, right? We're attempting to predict the probability, or use probability as when pitchers, just as a general, looking at it from a general's point of view, like 30,000 foot view in an at bat, you know, when a pitcher's ahead in the count, what does he or she tend to do? If she's a behind in the count, what does he or she tend to do? Now, it's not going to be 100% of the time. Nothing's ever really 100%, but like what you're saying is, we're taking the highest probability, and it could be 60% versus 40%, right? That this pitcher's going to throw a fastball in this count. Well, you can't sit in the middle. Well, it could be either fastball or a curveball, right? You say we're thinking just a pitch with two pitches, 60% chance you're getting a fastball, 40% you're getting a curveball. Well, it doesn't make sense to look for the curveball.
Right.
It's still, even though it's a low percentage of fastball in that count, or I mean, it's a 60%, but it's a majority, doesn't mean that you're going to get the fastball. And if you don't, what I tell my hitters is that you now learn something. So in that count, 60% of the time fastball, 40% curveball, but then you see a curveball, the reality, right? Well, now you learned something.
Right. Yeah, no, and that's the thing, like, everybody's different. Yeah. And this is where like every pitcher is different. You know, like his fastball is not his fastball. His curveball is not his curveball. Yeah. And so the really individualizing everything. And that's like the key of it, like individualizing as much as you can. And, you know, you're a different type of hitter than this guy. What does he know about you? Because he's studying you too. Yeah. So what are your weaknesses? And the more you know about what you do and your tendencies, the more you can game plan and almost maybe anticipate it. And again, like you said, doesn't mean you're always right. But it's all like, okay, he knows this, I know this, and that's when that chess match happens. And that's when baseball's fun.
Yeah, you know, a good friend of mine, Daniel Robertson, he played a lot of minor league ball, got a couple decent cup of coffees in the big leagues, played with Mike Trout with the Angels. A great guy, super intellectual guy when it comes to all this kind of stuff. And we were talking one day, and we were talking about the same thing. And you take one scouting report, because like we said, yeah, we could go and look up the pitcher's scouting report on PBR or whatever, but then the pitcher can look up your scouting report on PBR, right? You got a thing up. So what Daniel was saying was taking a scouting report or a heat map of a pitcher and what his strengths and weaknesses are in different counts and stuff. And you take the heat map of a hitter, strength and weaknesses, and then you see where those intersect, and you can take from that data a game plan. You can create a game plan. And again, it's not 100%, but right. I mean, something better than nothing. And again, the more you face the guy, the more data you have, and the more you can, you know, kind of fine tune that plan. And the other thing too that is interesting is some of the hitters, like when I start working with them, and they got a little bit to some time to go right before they're up there, but they're considered as a pitcher. And when I used to pitch, I pitched probably up to my sophomore year in high school, and then after that, I kind of got bored of it. As a pitcher, you're looking at a lineup in colors, like kind of in shades, right? You have certain hotter shades, and that could be, usually your 3, 4, 5 guys, maybe 1, 2, and then there's going to be some streaky guys that you'll see some red here and there, but it's not consistent. Usually red 3, 4, 5, maybe 6, and things like that. But then there's those kind of shades of gray in there that you tend to just default pitching, right? I'm going to pitch these guys the same way because they're in that shade, right? That gray shade. And so I tell my hitters, when you start smashing the ball, and smashing the ball is when pitchers have to make an adjustment. They don't care. They don't make an adjustment if you hit a blooper to right field as a righty or opposite, as a lefty, or hit a CNI single. Pitchers don't care. That doesn't scare them. They're just going to think you're lucky, and they're going to do it the same way the next time. So what do you guys do as your hitters when, so you got a guy that's hot? Now he can't look at his teammates and how they're being pitched as they're going to be pitched the same way. So how do you guys treat that? Like as they start leveling up?
Yeah. For us, it's really all our guys. It looks like you're individual.
Yep.
Like, yeah, you can take information from other guys, but if you're not the same hitter, the other thing is you don't see what he sees.
Mm-hmm.
Like we all see things a little bit differently. That's why, like, you see guys like, dude, his curveball nasty. The next guy's like, what are you talking about? So
yeah.
Everybody sees something different. So that doesn't mean that we don't take information
mm-hmm.
and understanding how they're pitching them, what adjustment they're making. I think we like to tell guys more than like seeing how they're pitching them, see how they adjust to them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then so when we can start seeing what his strategy and what's his approach to making adjustments, then we can kind of start looking at us and start saying, okay, so how would he adjust it if it was me, if I did X, Y, Z? And so every hitter's different. And when you get to a certain level, everybody's unique, and there's a spot for them. And so this is where we get into that mindset piece, which I'll talk about in a minute. If you don't mind.
Yeah. Good.
Okay. Yeah.
So go for it.
Yeah. So the mindset piece. So there's 3 mindsets that we've been able to identify over the last 5, 6 years, and it's really been eye opener. When you start figuring out where guys are at. So we have the first one is called the compare and convince mindset. Mm-hmm. So this is the guy that constantly comparing himself to everybody else. He's doing this, so I got to do this, or his numbers are this, I got to do that, or man, he's got 3 hits, I got to get 3. And so these guys never really focus on what they need to do. They're comparing themselves to everybody else. And so they don't play as well. And now they're convincing themselves, can I play at this level?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of guys are at that level. And every time you level up, you get to that level. You just kind of look around. Everybody's bigger, faster, and stronger, and they know how to play the game of baseball.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but for us, like we have the conversation all the time about figuring out where they're at mindset wise. And when guys struggle, that's where they're at most of the time. It's in that compare, convince mindset. So we got to bring awareness and and it's done through a conversation. Like we talk to them and really try to have them, and like we have the relationship with them that they can trust and be vulnerable a little bit,
mm-hmm.
So about where they're at. A lot of times they want to tell you all the good stuff. They don't want to tell you the bad stuff.
Yep.
And so we wanted it to be the other way around.
Teenagers, right? Teenagers.
Yeah, exactly. And so then the next one is called what we call compete and contribute.
Mm.
So now we've gotten them from compare, convince to now, dude, I look like everybody else,
mm-hmm.
and I can play at this level. And so that's you can level up with that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the next one is what we call the strategic advantage mindset. And that's what we work on. That's what we specialize on the last 5, 6 years. This is the guy that is owning himself. He's individualized. It's what he does and what he does or what he's going to do to give himself a game day advantage. So we're talking about mindset, skill set, and how you prepare. Mm-hmm. And so these guys are like really good with where they're at, even though they may not be where they want to be, but they're good with where they're at. They understand that they're a unique individual. They understand that they have a role that they are qualified for, and they're okay with that role, and they're going to succeed at that role and eventually get into a bigger role if they want. Mm-hmm. And so getting guys to that mindset, and man, it changes how they practice. It changes how they talk. Mm-hmm. It changes how they, it's just a confidence. It's just a different level because they feel free to be themselves and understand that what they do and where they're at is good enough.
Yeah.
You
I
know?
love that, dude. And I know we can go deep in each of these pillars, and we'll do that on future calls for sure.
Sure.
Before we get to where people can find more information on you, wanted to ask you, so how do you get a player out of, what are some of the questions? Because I love questions. And it's how we ask our questions, the quality of our questions makes the answers much more quality, right? So when you have a player in that comparison, in that mindset, in the bottom rung, when they're in there, what are some of the questions that you ask them to help get them to the next part of it, where they get into the second rung?
Yeah. So I always start with the conversation, because they're never going to just come out and tell you this.
Yeah.
So you always start with like, hey man, like let's say we're in season and he comes to me today. He had a game past weekend. Like, hey man, so how did it go? Where are you at? Like, what did you do? And so they'll kind of run through. Man, I struggled a little bit. I struck out a couple of times. There were we had 2 innings where we batted around and I got two of the outs and stuff like that. So I was like, okay, so why do you think you struggled? Like, what do you think it is? Like I don't give answers, man. Like I want them to tell me what they're seeing, because I don't know what they're thinking and what they're seeing. And so I'm trying to understand what they're thinking and what they're seeing. And so it always starts with like what did you know about the pitcher, if anything? Right? What did you know about the team? Because certain teams have certain philosophies on how they approach guys. So what do we know about them? And so what would your plan against them? And again, like at the youth level, even we can go and watch games in between and see where they're at and kind of figure out what we know about them. And a lot of these kids play each other all the time anyways. So I would start there with like, okay, what did you know there? And then, so what was your mindset about that? Like a lot of these kids, they'll go on like the U-Trip, or they'll go on PBR, and they'll go on the stuff and they'll psych themselves out before they even get out there, because these guys are good. And so it's like, so if you're there, then yeah, dude, you're like giving this guy too much credit. And so how do we get out of that? It's like, hey man, that's good, man. He's good. That's who you want to play. That's who you're trying to measure yourself against. And so we're trying to figure out like, so what did you know about them? Like and so what should have your mindset have been? What should your plan have been? And then it's about what would your, like, literally when you were in the box, what would your pre-pitch routine? Because the way we structure our pre-pitch routine, and we can talk about that later, is like we organize our thoughts in a way to keep us present on the task. Because if we don't organize our thoughts and we just have thoughts, and we can start thinking about anything. And so we have them organize their thoughts in a way. So we like, hey man, so where were you there? And that's really like those areas right there is really where it starts. And so then they get in the game and they're like, okay, this guy's fastball's fast. Like I already knew that coming in, and now he's like in this, like he's trying to convince himself that he can play against him. And so now we have that conversation about, okay, dude, that's where it started. It started long before you got in that batter box. It started with what you were thinking the moment you knew you were playing there. So how do we work on that thought process? We got to change the thought process about, okay, this dude's good. This is exactly who I would need to play to measure up where I'm at. And so how do I get an advantage over him? What are my skill sets? How can I game plan against him? And what advantage do I have against him? And so that's where we start with that whole process. And then that conversation gets deep, man. So, we can get into, again, we go through that path I was talking about. What were you seeing? Did you see the ball? What cue did you see? Were you on time? And all that stuff. But a lot of it goes back to that mindset and what they were thinking about that pitcher before it got into all the other stuff.
Yeah, love that. And we can go deep in that in maybe another episode or whatever. So to be respectful of your time, where can people find you? I know you're just starting to get online. You've been doing, and again, what I love about you is that you're in the trenches. You're doing all this stuff. You're not spending all your time on social media and calling and all. You're actually in the trenches doing the stuff. So I understand you're getting online now. So where can people find you as of today?
Yeah, so I'm on strategichittingguy.com. And so I'm building out, I'm trying to, the pillars that we talked about, it's more of a framework. I'm trying to build that out. Like I said, this has been 5, 6, 7 years in the making. Really testing it out, really seeing like great results. And we got guys from youth ball all the way to pro ball. And so it's been great, man. And I think like I want to help as much as I can because I feel like, man, dude, like if it can get a few little things, few extra things, especially game day stuff, we can help hitters get to that next level. And there's a lot of great coaches out there, man. There's a lot of them doing awesome stuff. And so, but I feel like we can do a little better on game day. And so this is just my small contribute to the community. And so, yeah, hopefully that'll come out here in the next couple of weeks. I'm finalizing the editing part. It takes some time, as you know. But on strategichittingguy.com.
Cool. Yeah. And so I see what you're doing, and you're versed in all the other stuff too, the mechanical stuff and all that. But like from our conversations, it seems like you're more like the glue. You're the glue that's in the middle of all this stuff that brings it all together, right? Brings all the puzzle pieces together and combines it.
Absolutely. Like the framework, we can plug anybody's stuff into it. So like, let's say, when we do our initial assessment, we start looking at what the holes are. And then we start saying, okay, you need the hitting performance lab here. So this is where you plug your stuff in. And then you need, this Joe down the road, his stuff plugged in here. And so we start plugging in the holes of where we need to be. And so that's what's cool about it is we've been able to kind of bring focus, because there's a lot of guys don't really know where they're at and they don't know what they need to be working on. And so now we have like an assessment process and a framework that allows them to just plug in holes and plug in whatever philosophy you believe. I don't really care as long as it helps, as long as you understand the pros and cons, if there is any, and how you game plan with it. So whatever you choose to do, it's great, man. Like I said, there's a lot of great stuff. There's a lot of different philosophy. I don't really care what you use as long as you can game plan and play on game day.
Right. Now, do you have any other like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, any of that up yet?
Yeah, so I got Facebook going. That's just my personal one, just Geoff Rottmayer.
Okay.
And then I got an Instagram going, and it's Geoff Rottmayer. Okay. And then same thing with a lot of stuff that I put on like my podcast. So my podcast, Strategic Hitting Guy. And that also I make it a video form on YouTube.
Okay, cool. So you got some YouTube stuff for those YouTubers out there. Very cool. Well, hey, Geoff, I appreciate your time, man, today. And hopefully, like I said, do some more episodes, part 2, part 3, and we can dive a little bit deeper into all this other stuff. So thank you for hanging with me today.
All right. Thank you.